Good evening. Hello, my name is Josh Brumberg. I'm the interim president here at the Graduate Center, and I'm happy to welcome you to our 7th season of City of Science events with tonight's discussion about cybersecurity. As a public university, the Graduate Center and its associated Advanced Science Research Center are committed to the idea that our scientific research has a role in advancing the public good. The issue of cybersecurity has grown in the public's consciousness, and I am proud to note that we here at the Graduate Center, along with colleagues at Cornell Tech, NYU, and Columbia, are co-recipients of a $12 million grant to advance cybersecurity from Google. To help us understand the issues surrounding cybersecurity, I'm very happy to introduce tonight's panel. At my far left, or your right, is Dr. Thomas Ristenpart, who is a professor of computer science at Cornell Tech. Welcome to the other island. Dr. Ristenpart's research focuses on computer security, cryptography, and privacy. Sitting next to Dr. Ristenpart is Dr. Ping Ji, who is a professor of computer science at John Jay College and the Graduate Center, where she also directs our PhD program in computer science and the master's program in data science. Her research focuses on security monitoring strategies for computer and wireless networks. And finally, next to me is Dr. Rosario Gennaro, who is a professor of computer science at both the City College of New York and the Graduate Center. Dr. Rosario's research focuses on network security, the security of cloud computing, and issues of privacy and anonymity while communicating online. Oops. I think we all agree that feeling safe when conducting transactions online are very important. And over the first part of tonight's event, I will be leading the panel in a bunch of questions. And then hopefully in the latter parts, we'll ask you, the audience, to ask questions of our panelists. So if you do have questions, please jot them down or keep them in mind so we can ask them at the end. And remind all the panelists, it's very important to speak in the microphone for our folks that are listening in online. All right, to kick things off, I think it's sometimes important to understand some of the basic terms. Maybe you didn't understand all the terms in my opening remarks. So I want to start with a very, what I think, we think is a simple term, but we hear all the time. What is a firewall? And then,
I was thinking, how are we going to do this? One person answer a question?
You just go, Ping, you can start off.
Yeah, firewall is basically, in the very essence level, it's just certain filters we set at, either in the computer or gateway routers, something called gateway routers or routers in general, to filter out, certain traffic or decide to let certain network traffic to come in or not coming in. So I hope that was a very, general but correct explanation.
Well, you're here to give us the correct explanation. We'll take your word for it.
My fellow panelists seems to agree with me, which is good.
All right, that's good. But you bring up another terminology there, the router. Is that something in the computer, something in the wall, or something in between?
Yeah, so, you can imagine it, most people have Wi-Fi these days. Not everybody, but a lot of people. How about now? Louder? Louder?
Is your mic on, Tom? Push the...
It says on, but there's no power.
Oh, there you are.
Oh, now. Oh. Always turn it on and turn it off. That's the key to all computer security and IT. Yeah. So I was just saying, your Wi-Fi router, at your home where you have where you connect your devices is an example of a router, right? And it also has some firewall capabilities, right? Because it blocks some traffic that may come towards your home, from the broader internet.
All right, so one of the things that is so important when we're getting online or getting in anywhere is a password. By plugging in our username and password, what's happening behind the scenes such that we can get access to whatever the site that we're interested in accessing?
This is a perfect question for cryptographer.
Thank you. Welcome. So there is a cryptographic protocol that matches, so you put your username, you put the password, and the password, hopefully, is a secret value that only you and the server on the other side knows. And so the password is somehow embedded into the communication flow to generate what we call a secret key that will encrypt the communication between the server and the channel, so that whoever is in the middle not only doesn't understand, but cannot inject messages. So the messages, once you put the password in, the messages can't be tampered with. And so only you will be able to access that communication flow because you were the person who knew the password. So, and this is an example of a shared piece of secret information that two parties need to have in order to establish this sort of secure channel that allows them to communicate securely.
So why is it we shouldn't use our pets' names as passwords?
You certainly can.
But is that safe?
Of course not. you want to jump in?
I mean, the password is this shared secret that, you're relying that other people can't guess that password, right? If you have your Google Gmail account or your Apple account or whatever, the only thing preventing, unless you turn on additional authentication checks, the only thing preventing other people on other computers from logging in to your Google account is not knowing your password, right? So if it's something really easy to predict, then it might be guessable, right? Attackers out there have lists of common passwords that people tend to choose. Like the most common one is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, unfortunately. And then every once in a while there's an upgrade to it, and the most common becomes 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. And so attackers will run through these lists of common passwords trying to log in to accounts, right? Often they're doing this for commercial purposes, right? Just like to take over a Google Gmail account so they can send spam or these types of things. There can be other problems where if you have someone who's like someone in your social circle that's trying to get into your account, right, for whatever reason, if they know you, they may be able to guess the password too, and that can be a problem as well. So it depends on, what type of attacker is trying to get in. But in general, you want your password to be something only you know and no one else.
I want to maybe jump in, I hope we will have time, because I really can't talk a lot. But anyway, so I want to tell you, I started the work at CUNY with Dante College about 20 years ago. 20 years ago, I gave students this, very rudimental computer networks project, which is we do have network monitoring tools that can observe network traffic. When we say network traffic, remember all these emails, these websites, nowadays like YouTube, all these videos, contents, pictures, they are to the computers zeros and ones, they are numbers. And all these numbers are packetized into little packets, and you can envision one packet is like a car on the street, right? So then we have this traffic of packets in the internet comparing to the car traffic on the road. It's very similar. The routers actually are like the intersections directing these cars to different directions. Without that said, so when we have the password or login, information, your username and password, when it represented into network traffic perspective is really something, it's just a data packet that can be observed or captured by any sniffer sitting in your network. And why I mentioned 20 years ago. 20 years ago, people were still using, applications like Telnet. I believe these two gentlemen remember, right? And many of you may, yeah. Telnet, literally, I asked students to turn on their computer, run, back then it's Ethereal. This application monitors network traffic, and run Ethereal, and open up John Jay's login, email login, type in their username, type in their password, and see what the network monitor can capture. Everything is there in plain text. Fortunately, the technology has advanced so fast, and thanks to the cryptographers and the people who are implementing these cryptographic, techniques, right? Nowadays, don't worry, the sniffers are still there, but your applications are encrypting those data. So this is what's happening, right? When you type in username and password, although there are still network monitors, like can capture the data packets or data traffic, they cannot tell what you are typing in there because to the data that they capture are all pretty much in, like we call it hexadecimal, like the code that, the hackers cannot say what is in there. Indeed, you can still use your past name, but, as Tom said, the hackers have their ways to exhaust the possibilities, the combinations. There are only 26 alphabets, right, the letters, and, 10 numbers, right, 0 to 9. Then the combination, they can try the combination, use computer programs to hack your password. So if you use something that is closed in your life, like your mother's name, your own birthday, your past name, your children's name, those may be the top priority, in the hackers try out list. That's why we say it's easier to hack it when you have some, familiar information being used in your password.
So this actually, to geek out a little bit the conversation and hopefully not go above everybody's head, this is actually a very, very interesting mathematical problem because you have a password which by design has to be easily memorizable, something that, you don't want to write it down on a piece of paper. So it has to be somewhat easy to remember, but at the same time should be hard to guess. And the two things are really in contradiction with each other. And this happens a lot in security. You want to make something that is easy to use, but hard to attack. And there's this conflict all the time. And so what Ping was saying about the conversation being encrypted so that the password doesn't travel in the clear as I'm logging in, it's incredibly important and something that for a while was actually very difficult to figure out how to do because at this point there is no secret with the other side, right? So one very important piece on this password login is that this guessing of the password cannot be done on the transcript. It's what we call an offline dictionary attack. After I log in, that conversation is useless to an attacker. In order for the attacker to guess the password, he really has to attempt a real login to the server, which will be probably stopped after 5 or 6 failed attempts, right? Which is why your account gets locked in after you fail a few times. But if the transcript would allow the attacker to try the password, then the attacker would take the transcript, run this exhaustive search that Ping was describing, and guess the password, and then go log in. And that was a very hard technical problem to solve.
You all use the term, I want to make sure, encryption. So what is encryption and how is your password encrypted before it's sent out on this data highway?
I will try. I will try because they know more advanced technology. I will try to use plain language to explain. I actually in ancient world, right? If you think about encryption, I think we have this kind of movies, in both Western and Eastern culture. If you think about so someone, if you and your mother, agreed, saying that, okay, so I want to send you a secret message. I'll use the Bible. Okay, and I'll give you a bunch of numbers. On page 25, row 1, the eighth letter, that's the first letter in my message. Okay, so things like that. I give you a bunch of numbers, but they refer to the page number, the row number, then the column number of the letter. Then you combine, you will retrieve that message and combine all these letters together into one sentence. So this is a very old-fashioned way of encrypting a message. Is this understandable? Okay, so then the encryption, decryption, the symmetric key here is really that sequence of number that you and your mother agreed upon before you set apart. You understand, right? That is a secret key. Similar here. Yes, good.
So,
I love teaching.
One of the interesting things about encryption is that it's divided into these two camps, right? One is called symmetric or secret key encryption, where if I want to communicate with Tom, we have established a secret piece of information that only the two of us know, for example, a password or something more secure, and then we go off in different places and we transmit information over a network, which is use that secret piece of information to somehow garble it in a way that only the two of us can recover. And this was the way encryption was known for a long time. The famous Caesar cipher, which is a permutation of the alphabet. And the key is exactly what permutation you're using. The Enigma in World War II and all of that were all examples of secret key encryption. What was not known for a while and was how to send an encrypted message to a person that I never met. So we have no secret information agreed a priori. And that was only discovered in the 70s, as a proposal was put forward in the 70s, as an interesting piece of information, as a really funny anecdote. The mathematics behind it had been discovered by this mathematician that worked for the British MI5, the equivalent of our CIA and NSA, and he was not allowed to publish it. And he had to watch from the sidelines all these other famous computer scientists getting accolades for their inventions, and he had this paper sitting on his desk that he had discovered years before. And then only like 20 or 30 years later, when the British government declassified this information, everybody realized that this Dr. Cox had invented public key cryptography much before Diffie-Hellman and RSA were the people that we today, would recognize as the, thank you. So, yeah.
All right, that's interesting. I mean, one of the things that we hear a lot when dealing with email that is a threat is, a phishing. This is not going to the Hudson River and getting a fish, but what is phishing?
Sure. So phishing, phishing with P-H-I-S, H-I-N-G. This is a good spelling bee quiz. Is this idea that you're getting an email that's trying to trick you into doing something that could lead to some other problems. So nowadays, a lot of the phishing emails will come in and say, oh, hey, I have a bunch of money that I need to give to someone. Because I guess the classic example is like a Nigerian prince, and this was called a Nigerian email scam. And the idea was to start a conversation with you to try to trick you into actually sending some money. Because what the scammer would do eventually is say, oh yeah, I have like millions of dollars to give you, but I just need like, 1,000, and then I can get, send you this money. And then of course, if you unfortunately fall for the scam, then you give the $1,000 and no millions of dollars are coming your way. You might get an email saying, actually, I just need $1,000 more to, this time it'll really work, I promise, etc. So phishing is those types of attacks. There's other ones that it'll like look like an email from a company, like Google or Apple or Amazon or the USPS. I saw one recently for the US Postal Service. And it'll look like an official email, and you click on the link in the email, and it takes you actually to an attacker-controlled website, shows most often a login prompt, and they're doing that to harvest your password, right? So that you'll think it's the Google login, type in your password, and go from there. So it's very important to check in the browser that it actually says google.com, at the front. Unfortunately, this is one of the best effort ways to do it. Check that it's the site you think it is in the URL, the top bar.
Another thing, when you're looking at the top part of the browser, it says HTTPS, right? And that's another important clue for users that this is a secure or not site.
So the S stands for secure, and it really means that communication has been encrypted and authenticated. So you're guaranteed when there is that S over there that it's really the website that you intend to talk to. But definitely the manual analysis of the URL, and make sure that it's like USPS.com rather than USPSX or something.com. Check that because it's really the crucial step for that.
I do want to add that, you know, the phishing techniques nowadays not only is within the range of emails. There are social engineering ways, like, you know, text messages. Recently, there's some kind of really weird, like UPS or USPS, somehow, some number pretend saying that, you know, they are USPS and asking you, okay, so you have this, and they said it, the tone in the writing is very affirmative, saying that you have a package that you need to pick up. Don't do anything. You know, like whenever I see this kind of weird text messages, or just someone just say hi, I will just delete them right away. I block them and report spam. And like one very interesting case that I indeed personally encountered was somebody tried to impersonate my colleague at Zhang Jie, literally saying that to ping, this is Aftab, hi, you know, and saying that, do you have a moment? I'm like, text message me. And I said, this number, I do have a cell phone number, but this is not really the cell phone number coming from that particular one. And after, but you know, he indeed, you know, said somebody, mentioned somebody that I really do know, right? So I did respond. I said, are you okay, Aftab? Because I remember he was on some kind of, you know, medical leave. And Aftab said, do you, the Aftab quote, Aftab said, do you have access to the closest CVS store right now? Right away, I smell something wrong, and I text my other friend at Zhang Jie saying, you know, like Shweta is up there today, and Shweta said, no, this is definitely some fake, you know, person. So the problem I want to mention now here is that the phishing techniques, again, is not only with the emails nowadays. There are so many social engineering, you know, tactics nowadays the hackers are trying to use. Their goal is to steal your personal information so that they can use to hack into your personal accounts down the road.
And they're getting very successful. I mean, most of the ransomware, you all heard about cities that have been locked down, hospitals that have been locked down out of their data. Most of them start from an employee clicking on one of these phishing emails. And in the worst case, they're not just harvesting your password, they're locking up the entire organization that you work for. So and one of the things that I find interesting about phishing is that one of the places in which cybersecurity and AI are sort of intersecting, because I think AI is being really good at developing spam filters for this kind of stuff, but at the same time, AI is really great at developing phishing techniques. So it's really an arms race between the two, and you know, it's actually kind of fascinating to watch it as a person who works in this area, but it is a very dangerous tool.
Yeah, I definitely want to get back into a discussion about AI, but two more terms that I want to go through so we're all kind of know what we're talking about. We hear a lot about VPN, and what role does that play in cybersecurity?
You take it.
So a VPN stands for a virtual private network, and the idea is that you will set up basically this tunnel, this secure encrypted tunnel between your computer and what's called a proxy, which is just another server on the internet, another computer that's on the internet that will route your traffic. So for example, like nowadays, Apple iPhones and all their devices, they do all of this with all of their traffic. So every website you visit is actually channeled through Apple servers, which is not the standard from previously. And they do that to improve security in various ways. It hides like the address, the internet address of your phone from other websites you may be visiting. Like maybe you accidentally got an email that you clicked on that was uspx.com and go to that site. You know, normally, I put the X in there because it's a typo, right? It's a common phishing thing that Rosario was talking about. So that website would know like what your IP address is and these types of things. And a VPN will protect against that.
And then how about coming more and more multi-factor authentication?
I can take it. So that's a way to make sure that so authentication is a way to establish your identity, that you are the right person. So the password is number one, right? So that's one factor in which you can authenticate it, but you can prove to Google that you are the right person if you also answer your phone, right? So then it becomes a two-factor authentication. So you're proving to Google that it's you because you know the password, and they sent you a text message on your phone that you can copy onto the server. And you can keep going. You can have three-factor. And that really goes to that tension that I was talking about before between ease of use and security, right? Let's face it, two-factor authentication is a pain in the neck. But at the same time, it's a very, very strong security tool that we have at our disposal.
Another thing I'm sure everyone in the audience has experienced is they're going onto a website and says, do you accept the cookies? It's not just, yes, because you're hungry, but is that something we should be doing?
Actually, it's fine. It's fine.
We should start a step back. What is a cookie? What are you accepting?
So cookie, I do teach computer networks, okay? So cookie is, let me think how to explain this, easily and concisely. So basically, cookie is commonly used for commercial websites that are hosting something like to sell to you, or a cookie is associated with one user, usually from one particular IP address, and it helps the website, the server side, to record your accessing behavior to that particular website. For example, Amazon, right? Amazon has a cookie for you. A cookie basically is just an ID, but that ID represents you, like me, Pingji, using this particular computer. Okay, if I change a device, if I use my phone to access Amazon, it's possible that Amazon will use a different cookie, but with maybe a minor change, in my original cookie. But basically, the cookie is a very convenient way for the servers to record the user's accessing behavior. Again, your shopping behavior, your favorite movies, like the YouTube has the cookies, right? And maybe Coursera, I actually don't really use Coursera, but maybe they know the type of knowledge that you want to learn, things like that. I hope this is a satisfying explanation. That's very, yeah.
Well, it allows then the website to customize what you're seeing.
Exactly, right. So yes, very good. So indeed, so the website know your habit. They will feed in advertisement to you according to your habits. And this is related to the AI also, to learn how the people behaving around the certain websites, yeah.
Right, so Rosario, you brought up artificial intelligence or AI. How is that shaping the way data security or cybersecurity is approached not only from the individual user's perspective, but also at the back end by the internet providers?
So one way that I'm seeing AI being deployed, it's on the positive side, let's put it this way, is that AI is actually becoming incredibly good at coding. And so to the point that debugging by AI is maybe one of the most efficient tools to find bugs. And so for me, the best use of AI, and I don't know if they want to talk about some, is that it's really raising the quality of code. And the less bugs we have in code, the less security flaws are going to be, available to attackers. You guys have it?
Yeah, I mean, another example is trying to do basically more advanced behavioral or anomaly detection, right? So if you're running a big enterprise as a company, you have lots of employees with lots of workstations or laptops, right? And some of them may get attacked, right? Someone accidentally gets a phishing email, clicks on a link that downloads, and they get tricked into downloading some malicious software. And then the hope behind these AI behavioral / anomaly detection tools is that if they're monitoring what that computer is doing now, from that point forward, it'll start deviating. It'll start doing something different than the normal behavior when the employee is just using the computer. And so these type of machine learning AI techniques can be helpful in trying to spot that kind of deviation in behavior and then raise an alarm that, oh, actually this computer maybe should be investigated, as another example on the defensive side.
But obviously, there were controversial discussions about, the usage of AI, right? In the cyberspace. One, big problem nowadays the research community is trying to get into is the ethics, right? Like how, well, you learn my behavior, but ultimately, or just after a certain time of using a certain website, say YouTube, I start to get all these things that are related to my past access pattern, which actually may not be good, right? For us, during election years, maybe it's not good to even mention politics nowadays, but during election years, you would observe that, when you watch a lot of Democrats, toned, news articles or videos, you get more of those type coming back to you, rather than if you watch CNN a lot. I got all the CNN, video clips coming back to me, not Fox, right? But is it right? Is it good? So that actually is a research that we want to do, and it's a piece of direction of research that I, as a computer scientist, think that we really should engage the social science side, the ethics of the ethics aspect of cybersecurity.
You mentioned something earlier, Ping, about the hackers lying there waiting to get the data packet. Who are these hackers? Are they just individuals up in their bedroom? Are they government actors, both?
That's a big question. It could be a kid just playing around. For example, I got Zoom bumped not many years ago, just when Zoom just was really utilized in the beginning, of the pandemic, right? A lot of people are using Zoom. I hosted an open house for data science master's program here. What is an open house? You open it up to the general public, to prospective students, in hope that they will ask you questions and come in and be interested in your program. So we set up the Zoom. Then 3 IDs on the screen. They start to hijack the session. So those are hackers. Those are hackers already. Okay, so their goal is to make my session cannot move on, cannot go on. So who are they? I, as a computer scientist, I requested the IT's help here because we had the recording for that Zoom session, and I asked IT's help to release my particular session's network traffic, so that I can see which IP addresses are these users logging in from. Okay, and I literally associated with those IP addresses with the video where the problem starts. So I was able to identify a few IP addresses. Who are they? This is really a big question, and it's actually one of my pain, which is, I have taught the course network forensics. I might be one of the pioneers, who has put up a curriculum in network forensics. But the more I teach this course, the more upset I am. Because the internet, why do we need all this encryption, decryption, the cryptographic, techniques to protect our traffic? Because the internet was built in a way that we assume everybody is a friend to each other. Okay, so the baby version of ARPANET, right? It's called ARPANET, was really just built for a bunch of researchers to be able to share their research, results across the coasts of United States, MIT and UCLA. And there was no encryption, just like the Telnet example I gave in the beginning. So everything flying, all the data flying in the internet was observable and in plain text. But this creates great convenience for human beings to communicate. But also the security problem getting worse and worse. And right now, almost the only thing that we can rely on is encryption, the cryptographic techniques. Not only the simple symmetric key, example that we gave earlier, but there are really very complicated ones. And nowadays we have quantum computing. By the way, contributes the encryption or cryptographic word. Well, still prematurely, but there is a hope maybe. But anyway, so I am a little, who are the attackers? These could be anybody. But indeed, there are organized attackers, like there are human trafficking, things happening, right? Drugs are dealt, in the internet. There are really dark crimes, in the internet conducted through this network hacking, in the cyberspace. But there are indeed maybe just a teenage, girl or a boy, just playing around.
Well, that brings up a second question. If you're in a three-dimensional world and you break a law or do something nefarious, there is police or some other governmental agency that regulates your behavior. Is there a similar oversight of the internet?
Yes, but it's evolving and more limited. We have I'm not a lawyer and I don't study law, but we have federal law that prohibits breaking into other people's computers. And that gets used to charge criminals who break into computers and do spam campaigns, these things. Now, of course, like with everything, including in the three-dimensional world, right, we have laws in the books, we have investigative techniques to try to figure out who committed the crimes, and then we have a judicial process to try to provide fair treatment. All those things also occur for technology-based crimes to better or worse effect, right? A lot of the problems, a lot of times with cybercrime is that it's across national borders, right? So a huge issue is that a lot of these people are doing spam operations, other things are in other countries, right? Which provides a big barrier to investigation and then holding people accountable. There's also kind of the rise in, I think over the last 20 years, we've seen a big jump in nation-state actors, right? So, in the U.S., most of our, offensive cyber operations are run by the military and the NSA. In other countries, it's like more mercenary groups that are kind of loosely affiliated with official government operations. And so when you see in the news a lot of talks like, oh, there's a huge vulnerability that's being exploited all over the internet, it's a lot of that type of, those type of operations that are actually getting a lot of press attention. So it gets into geopolitics very quickly. And I can keep going on that, but go ahead.
Oh, that's great. Ping, you had a comment?
I want to add that, again, from the teacher or professor's perspective who teaches, network forensics, I feel the mirror, the countermeasure against, cyber crimes or attackers are far from enough. When Tom mentioned, Tom mentioned more on the national level, maybe, those are really dedicated groups of people, guarding the national security. However, what about us, right? The regular, individuals and small business or just business in general, when there are, you keep hearing, and I feel that, this kind of stories are booming, exponentially. Say, a little school, non-for-profit, got a ransomware attack, right? And what is the financial consequence? Who is going to pay for the loss? Nobody. It's really the school has to swallow it. So who is going to identify exactly who did this? It's very hard. It's very hard, again, because of the inherited characteristics of the internet being a safe haven for anonymity. It's very hard to keep the track and to trace back who, was the original person who conducted the bad behavior.
At the risk of opening a can of worms, and there is also, if we haven't really figured out the whole transition from the three-dimensional world and the network world, and especially in terms of law enforcement. This is my personal opinion.
I agree.
One example that I can bring is, it used to be that if you call somebody on the phone and do some illegal thing on the phone, that a reasonable prosecutor could get a wiretap order and monitor your communication. And this is not trivial anymore on the internet. not only because the internet was designed as a fully open network to begin with, but also due to the security that we have been putting in place in terms of encryption and in terms of authentication. And that is a big, in my mind, ethical question that sort of hangs over our research area, because on the one end, we want to make sure that network communication is as secure, as unbreakable as possible, but at the same time, we're sort of and making any possible way of allowing to tap on an encrypted communication is also opening that system to abuse. So it's a question that the entire field in my mind doesn't really figure out how to deal with. And there's lots and lots of interesting discussion. For example, right now with the European Union, there's a proposal out for scanning of encrypted messages for child pornography. And there are devices out there, there are protocols out there which are designed not to be scanned, exactly because we want that security for their users. And so where is the balance? It's really not clear. And it's sort of something that has to be figured out in a way.
So if you were giving advice to our audience today on how best to be secure on the internet, what would your advice be?
Well, for me, I always tell people to use a password manager. So what is a password manager? A password manager is, Google now has a password manager already encrypted or and installed. They basically select the password for you, right? And it's a strong password. You don't have to remember. Your browser remembers it. And of course, there's a risk because if you lose your computer, all your passwords are stored there. And but at the same time, one of the problems that happens is that people use the same password across all websites. And so if one website is compromised and your password is lost on that particular website, this is what happens. Passwords are sold on the black market. You buy that password, and then you break on all the bank accounts of this person, all their emails, all there. Using a password manager prevents at least that particular, and also prevents writing your password on a piece of paper, because that's what people did before a password manager. So that's my number one recommendation.
I would add on that and recommend you update your systems over time. Right? Yeah, this is we share pretty much the same ideas. Yeah, so the operating system, the softwares that you use over time, they ask you to update the system. Do it. Because usually those updates most likely includes security patches, patch up their problems, their own like a program holes, like a security holes in their applications. Yeah, that is another thing that I want to mention.
Yeah, great suggestions. I think when you're thinking about security, the first thing security professionals do is say, okay, well, what's your threat model? Is the kind of jargon from our field, right? Who are you worried about breaking into your systems? And so a lot of what we've been talking about is this like commercially motivated kind of broad attacks, right? Like, oh, they're just trying to get into accounts. Like, my partner's Airbnb got compromised, right? Because we were using a bad password on the account. And they did it to try and use our account for fraud, right, to make some money. But they didn't actually care about us, right? They were just, So, yeah, like worrying about these type of indiscriminate attacks, then there's a bunch of basic good practices. Like using a password manager is great because it makes it so you don't use weak passwords that maybe are used everywhere else. Turning on two-factor authentication is also a very strong thing. It's super annoying, but it helps a lot because even if your password did get disclosed somehow, or you used a weak password, it's not enough to get into your account anymore. Updating your software is also good, right? Because it just means that these type of software bugs that some people can exploit are gone. these aren't the only, abuse models out there, right? This is like commercially motivated kind of stuff. We also, if you have some problem with like an intimate partner or some other person who who is in your social circle who's causing problems, your technology is kind of a whole different ball game, right? And you may need to think a bit more holistically about, okay, I need to, lock down physical access to my device because someone, I live with is actually causing problems for me. So, it starts with threat modeling, I think, and you can kind of work backwards a little bit to thinking about what types of things you need to do. Yeah.
All right, so I want to turn to the audience and allow them to ask some questions, and we'll get to as many as we can. But the one thing I do ask of you is Jimmy's going to come around with a microphone and speak into the microphone. So right here, Jimmy, we'll start on this side and then move over so people online and everyone in the room can hear your question. Ma'am.
Okay. Hi, thank you for being here and for the information. I had a question about the cookies and how every website you go to, you come away with cookies. Does it, if you're bothered by all these targeted ads and things, does it help any to clear them? I mean, it's a pain because when you clear them, I think Google only allows you to clear all or none. Does it help to occasionally clear your cookies or not?
Yes, in the sense that if you clear your cookies, it'll break that kind of chain of them realizing your sequence of activity, right? It also breaks functionality often, right? I mean, cookies are necessary, and it's one of these things where it's a balancing act, right? Like ideally, we'd be in a world where companies weren't abusing use of cookies to do things like targeted advertising that we find invasive and objectionable, but it's a complicated thing. So yes, you can remove cookies. If you're visiting a site that you don't want them to link to your other visits, you should consider using, or you can consider using like incognito or private browsing modes. What those do is they just don't give the access to the website any of the cookies that you had set. And finally, if you're really worried about ads, you can install one of these ad blocker, like Ad Blocker Plus is a fine tool for like, I use it and kind of removes the ads. It's kind of nice. Doesn't necessarily prevent all cookies, but makes the browsing experience much nicer, actually, I think.
I think we had a question over here. Jimmy, all right.
Yes, when I go on a public website with my cell phone and I log on to my email, can a hacker see my password? Again, I'm not putting in my password, I'm just clicking on. So is there a problem?
Not anymore, I think. Like again, 20 years ago, yes. I was like advising my students to do the projects, right? Because back then, not a lot of applications are using encryption techniques. Only about 2 years, 3 years after my 20 years mark, I think, about 2008-ish, a lot of, most of the applications, indeed, they have to, use encryption. Whenever encryption is used, your password, your username, including your username, cannot be observed by any sniffer easily. They can only guess. They can only guess what, username and password you are using. And how do they measure whether or not the guess is successful? They will try to generate the same pattern as what they observed, the digit pattern that they observed or captured in the network traffic, but with the guessed, password. And they try this over and over again until they see the matching. Then they will say, okay, so this guess is correct.
But of course, if I create a new username and a password to get onto a new,
change.
then
yes.
My password could be compromised. No?
No, not right away. But if a hacker really wants to hack you, the hacker definitely, he or she can keep trying.
So probably better not to create usernames and passwords on a public
Right.
Wi-Fi.
I think it's okay, right? If you're on a public Wi-Fi, creating a username and password for a site that you trust, make sure it's not USPX.com, but USPS.com. Mm-hmm. It's okay as long as it's using HTTPS, right? And so it's encrypted. If it's not, then maybe not. Then you should be a little bit more concerned. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you. I have a question about encryption. So say I'm a bank and I own a bank and I have lots of financial data that bad people want, nefarious actors want. Why wouldn't I just close it off to those actors who are encrypting themselves? Sort of, it's a forensics question. So if I can't confirm that it's my bank customer, but there's some sort of weird, because my bank customer, I'm always going to be able to know who that bank customer is. I have their address, I have their, right? So why someone else comes and tries to get into my system and they're using all sorts of encryption to hide their identity, why don't I just block them?
The bank cannot tell who is using a bunch of encryptions to hide their identity. What I meant earlier was that the encryption techniques can be indeed utilized by the attackers in many ways, but bank is just one type of application or one type of service provider. They really don't know. When people encrypt their, like a login information, it is a user to them. But I do want to say, with my limited knowledge about the banking system, I do know that they have a very tough encryption system standing by, so which is even isolated from the rest of the internet. Maybe I don't know whether Rosario and Tom have worked on projects like that.
Once you're inside the system, then you've been recognized as a user. So the question is, once you're inside the system, what can you see, right? So you only should be able to see your account. You shouldn't be able to see some other account. And that encryption plays a role in that, for example. And the other question is, why can't you encrypt everything? I don't know if I understood the question correctly, but one other thing that you can say, can you encrypt your data so that when somebody comes breaks into your system, your data is encrypted? The question with that is that if your data is encrypted, then your normal operation is slowed down by the fact that your data is encrypted, right? So, but if you break into the system, you're recognized as somebody who has legitimate access. The firewalls that we talked about at the beginning is one of the ways to, as you were saying, lock people out. So if somebody comes in that is not recognized, then the firewalls would block them.
I mean, I guess my question was, why can't the bank system recognize the difference between someone who's encrypted themselves and someone who's just like me, Alex, with a bank account?
Not only the banks. No other network services can recognize that. None. So this is the problem, right? So it makes the network forensics so difficult. If any of the network services could tell, then we have a hope. So it's just again, when what does it mean? Your system, your account is compromised. It means that an attacker can 100% impersonate you. So which means to the bank, to Google, to YouTube, whatever network service is out there, this person's attacker, ping, is you. I am you. To them, I'm literally you, not myself, right? Not the hacker. So they are, in that sense, actually, those service providers, they are victims too. Actually, they do lose a lot of money every year. They just don't tell. They don't want to tell.
Over.
Hi, we spoke a lot about encryption and identity, but when I think about cybersecurity, there's also just other threats, whether it's destructive actions like denial of service, or maybe someone gets through your firewall, is quiet. What are some of the techniques or other spaces, and just kind of learning about the full surface area here?
We can talk about this for 2 semesters.
So. Go ahead.
I mean, we can maybe narrow down a little bit more on what you're talking about, but I think in general, the scope of what we worry about in computer security has been expanding, right? And so I think the traditional threat model that computer security research works on was this kind of network adversary model. Like we have data going back and forth between me and my computer and other servers on the internet. We want to protect that. We want to make that a pipe that is like unbreakable so you can't get into it. Then we have to worry about authentication. So even if you have an unbreakable pipe, do you know who you're talking to at the other end of it, right, or not? And then we talk about problems like passwords. This is the common way we authenticate ourselves. And we also have to worry about the servers at the endpoint. Maybe I can send something through this pipe that takes control over the remote server and takes over the Google server, right, which came up kind of indirectly in some of the conversations. And that's a software security problem. That's why people tell you patching is very important, because we learn about these bugs that allow people to take control over computers. So and then they get fixed, and then you update your software and go from there. And then there's, I think, in personal interest of mine is like the broader kind of sets of abuse that happen online. So harassment or cyber stalking or this kind of what industry has started calling trust and safety issues, where people are just, using technology to cause harm to others, right? And that's an increasing scope of things that I think computer security people are really worried about.
One thing that I find very interesting right now is disinformation. And disinformation is really not traditionally an area of computer security because, as Tom was saying, for me, I was trained to say this is something that I reject because I don't know the person who's sending it to me, or it's not the person. So it's an issue of identity and authentication, right? So, but disinformation is really something else, right? It's information that travels widely and causes enormous damage. And as we had to completely rethink, because the tools that we have, encryption, authentication, passwords, they're completely not designed for that. And it's where cybersecurity becomes social sciences, where cybersecurity becomes psychology and all of that. And I think it's for me, it's the new frontier of cybersecurity, is really interfacing a lot more with this other more social sciences kind of studies.
I think there was a question right next to you.
Yes, earlier this year, they talked a lot about TikTok and what the Chinese government might be able to get. So I wanted to know about security of apps on your phone. It's like, should there be any concern? Like, sometimes you're like, oh, that's like a nice game, I want to download it. Like, what should I know, or is there any real concern about apps on my phone?
There is actually quite complicated, I have to say. Yeah, so just a few days ago, what is that, the game, Roblox? Right? Yeah, somebody abducted a girl through, this game, computer game. Because, the chat, right, embedded with the game, then the person, a middle-aged guy, I think, I don't remember which state, basically start to engage this teenage girl and lure her out of the house, then basically kidnap her. Right, so this is online to offline, the crime is there, right? And the apps, benign ones, years ago, I remember I was in this conference, Microsoft did a little project trying to monitor the apps, the other phones apps, their accessing behavior to the sensor data in your phone. Sensing data means like your location, right? So it would make sense to weather.com accessing your location information. However, Angry Bird was accessing location information too. Why? But all this we don't know. I mean, the apps indeed, the app designer, they have their rights to, put up the software, and somehow Apple or Google would approve this software to be, put on their market. But what can they access? They can access a lot of things. And do you agree? If you want to use the app, you have to agree to their agreement, right? So, but indeed, well, the hope is that hopefully most apps are good, apps, they are only utilized to serve you. But definitely there are so many risks. Again, like the social engineering or this engaging. A lot of social problems. I'm really worried about young people, right? Like the kids. Yeah.
Yeah, just to add on. I mean, I think there's like with a lot of these things, there's a little bit of reputation, right? So if it's from a reputable company, then it's probably a bit safer. If you are, finding some app that hasn't been installed a lot and whatever, it might be that you want to worry about these types of things. Like some of them install with it, information to try and extract. So if it's asking for a lot of permissions on your phone, like for your location data, for access to other things, and it's like a little game app that you kind of sets off some alarm bells maybe, then you could think twice about using it. Hopefully that's a little helpful as an add-on. Yeah.
This is why I say we need 2 semesters.
Yeah. Over here, Jimmy.
Yes, what I'm trying to understand is that when you get emails from your bank and then you question whether they're emails from your bank because when they say you owe or you're expecting to have this taken out of your bank when you know you didn't. How does that happen? And when when I don't click on it and I go to the bank, I ask them what to do about it, and they said all you do is just ignore it. Well, to me, that's not an answer enough because they keep sending it, and then they keep saying you owe, or they keep saying that you have something coming through. And then the same thing with Amazon. They tell me I have a $400 thing coming in from an iPhone. I say, I never question. So I call them and they say the same thing. Just ignore it. Ignoring it isn't the answer I want. I want to know how to stop it.
This sounds exactly like our conversation early, phishing emails.
Yeah.
And,
Block them. Put them in the spam field, Yes.
Yeah. Yeah, and political campaigns are also doing a lot of spam nowadays, right? It's really hard. I get a lot of physical mail spam that I just throw away constantly, and it's just one of these like tragedies of modern life that, we haven't figured out how to prevent this type of stuff, right? Both kind of in the broader sense of, can we make it so that people are accountable so they don't spam us, right? And from the narrower thing of like detecting these things digitally, or I guess it would be great to have someone next to my mailbox who just takes all those like flyers for furniture I don't want to buy and throws them in the mail in the garbage for me. So yeah, unfortunately, it's not ideal. Yeah, and the banks will say that they don't put in links in their emails, right? Has been something that a lot of banks have started doing. They just don't put in links, so don't click on links in anything that looks like it's from a bank, right? And you should instead just go to the website directly. But it's kind of like, in New York, you walk down the street and someone comes up to you and starts talking to you. What do? Yeah, I walk away pretty quickly, right? And I think that sensibility, that mindset can be helpful a little bit with interactions online too, right? That, there's people trying to scam you and have to be a little, New York tough or something. I'm not sure what the right term is. Yeah.
Right here in the middle. We'll wait for the microphone.
Hi, I had a question going back to Carol's question, which was, being a compulsive dollar store shopper, I discovered this site called Temu, and I was told not to shop on Temu because they keep telling you download their apps, and their apps are stealing your information or something. But in my mind, I thought if I use the website, I won't be affected. It's only if I download the apps. Is that correct thinking, or are they one and the same?
Probably. I mean, it depends on what type of information you're worried about them stealing, but if on the app may have like location information, but also your browser will also give that information too if you allow it to the site. So in general, it's probably mostly the same, in terms of the information they have access to.
So the concerns about those kind of apps, actually, it also relies on their security team. So which means, so basically those apps, indeed, you are giving them your personal information. like your credit card information, your home address if you want to shop and have something shipped to you, right? Those are personal information. If the app company does not do a good job, it's possible for your information to be stolen. It has happened in the past, with many other companies, even famous companies. Facebook, their user IDs and password got stolen in the past, right? So this is a kind of security concerns that we are talking about when we talk about an app. It's not necessarily that they are stealing your information. So their system got compromised is one thing. That's unwillingly your information is stolen, but they may willingly sell your data. That is a little more malicious. This is something that we really should go against.
All right, I would like to really thank our panel tonight, Tom, Ping, and Rosario. And I'd like to say, if you're interested in more public science events, our next City of Science event is November 16th, where instead of having me ask the questions, we got a real pro. The journalist Leslie Stahl will be interviewing Nobel laureate James Allison about immunotherapy and its role in cancer treatment. So you can sign up for that event in the same way that you signed up for this event. And should you want to come back and realize you wanted to see something tonight, you'll get an email sometime in the next week or so giving you a link to the YouTube video. You can choose to click on the link or go to YouTube and search it, depending upon the take-home lesson you got from tonight. So thank you very much. Thanks again to our panel.